will vote aye. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? If not, the clerk will record the vote.
Mr. Speaker, 45 representatives voted aye, 54 have voted no.
Motion has failed. Representative Schreiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we take House Bill 509 off the table in Health and Human Services and place it on second reading on the 66th legislative day.
Representative Schreiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're hearing today is a theme of priorities, and we spent 2 days in this body talking about priorities. And we talked about on this side, these are our priorities, so we get to talk about them some more. We've talked about working families in Montana so far and how we want to benefit working families. We've talked about vets. Apparently it's too expensive for us to pay to help our vets. We've talked about protecting our elderly. That's too expensive. And we just talked about economic development for Montanans. We view some of these things as Native American, but at the end of the day, they're Montanans, folks. We're going to talk about another priority that I sure hope everybody in this room can agree on, and that's that Montanans need to stop killing themselves. House Bill 509 simply did one thing. It said we're going to put out a little bit of money and we're going to fund some suicide prevention activities around the state. Now, I will be honest with you. I'm really passionate about this, and I'm a little disgusted because so far in the legislature, we have done nothing for one of the hardest things that our state faces, and that's suicide. Montana, for 40 years, has ranked in the top 10 in suicides. And what have we done so far this session? Nothing. This bill should be heard on the House floor, ladies and gentlemen. There's no way the people of Montana think that that suicide's not a big enough deal for us to actually get to the floor to at least have a talk about. If there was issues with the bill, I'll be honest, I was stunned to see this bill not come to the House floor. In the hearing, we had folks come. We had 18-year-olds come in and say, you know what, I've tried to commit suicide twice in my life, and at this point in my life, I am way too young to be telling you this story. And if there's anybody in this room that thinks that she's wrong and she's not too young to be telling that story, I dare you to stand up and say that in front of the body. Right now in the state of Montana, the rate of suicide in our Native American brothers and sisters is double that of other folks. Double. So not only would this bill help the fact that help our state as far as our suicide problem, it actually targets the most at need or most needful individuals when it comes to this happening, to suicide. But it doesn't just target Native Americans. It targets rural Montana. And I don't know if you folks have noticed, we're a rural state. It helps our state as a whole. A little tidbit of information, the suicide rate for rural citizens in the United States is also about double that of folks in urban areas. So when you come and you have a state that is mostly rural, has a high Native American population, and this isn't an anti-gun activity, but we have easy access to firearms, it's the perfect storm that hurts our people. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to bring this to the floor and tell the people of Montana that keeping people from hurting themselves is a priority for the Montana State Legislature this session. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Whittick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the body, we did have a good hearing on this bill. Probably many of you haven't read the bill. If you did read the bill, you would see that this was similar to a lot of bills we got in Human Services Committee. And I'll tell you why it was similar. We were asked to spend lots of money, and on this bill I think it was $300,000. No fiscal note, but it's inside the bill. And we were asked to take certain legitimate problems and try to find a solution in 2 or 3 pages in 1 or 2 hours. Now, if you look at the bill, what you'd see is it called for a 24-hour hotline in at least 4 places in Montana. And those hotlines would have to be staffed by professional counselors. And there is no way that this is a pilot project. this is would become a permanent fixture of government. Just like we heard a day or two ago about a pilot project that the bill came before us, and it was a very simple bill. I don't know if you remember. It just removed the word pilot, and it became a permanent fixture of government within a 2-year period. That's what would happen in this bill. People are concerned about suicide. They're concerned about suicide on the reservations. But this bill is throwing money at a concern with very little hope to receive any return. I think the other thing that struck many of the committee members was when we asked, how much is the state paying on suicide issues now? Nobody knows. This isn't like the first dollar that would be spent on suicide prevention. We are spending, I don't know how much, but I think a lot. And what are we getting in return? If anything, it seems like our numbers are going up. So, it was a well-intentioned bill. I don't think it's the way to govern by having a concern and then coming up with a number, $300,000 for pilot projects, $75,000 apiece. It may do some good. I think we can do better than that. I would resist the motion.
Representative Peppers.
Mr. Chair, fellow body, what are we getting in return? We could get back productive members, people who have where we could have prevented suicide. I can tell you a lot about suicide. Last summer we lost an 11-year-old girl. I knew that family. It grieves me to think that somebody thinks that's a solution to a problem. This pilot project, perhaps if it had been in place, somebody could have said, hey, that's not a solution. My daughter was a page here. That young woman, and I like that because she's a certified Cheyenne, but she was left on our doorstep because her parents couldn't take care of her. And we fought. She's an A student right now. She loved being a page. But last year, she decided that's the way she should go, just because she has some disorders, had issues in school. But we were fortunate. We kind of watched her. We understood. We dealt with the issue. But how many people are going to understand an issue like that? And why do I understand an issue like that? Because I have lost several people in my life. And I must remind people, in Vietnam War, we had a draft. But guess what? 84% of our Native population volunteered. And those are the people that now are homeless. They feel hopeless. And those are the people that say, my state does not support me. They are too worried about money. I fought for my country. I didn't say, I'm going to do it for this much money. I did it for my state of Montana, and I ask that you support this bill.
Representative Stephenson, you raise as a proponent or an opponent?
Neither, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Stephenson.
I move we adjourn.
Substitute motion to adjourn. Representative Stephenson.
Mr. Speaker, I think my motion is probably out of order. I'll retract it.
Your motion is withdrawn. Thank you, Representative Stephenson. Further discussion. Representative Kipp, we've already had 2 proponents for the motion. Do you rise as an opponent?
No, Mr. Speaker, I rise as an opponent, so I guess
You rise as a what?
as an opponent.
As an opponent?
I mean a proponent.
We've already had 2 proponents on the motion. You're out of order. Seeing no further discussion on the motion, Representative Schreiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So just to, before I really get into my close on my motion, I would like to say if we're going to talk about bills on the House floor and why we shouldn't bring them, we should be honest. And this bill that I'm holding right here does not say they have to have a 24-hour hotline. That's just false. It says it's an option. And we can get into the bill when we get this on the floor on Monday. But at the end of the day, folks, if we don't bring this to the House floor, basically what we've said today is working families from Montana that pay taxes and just happen to have us as their employer are too expensive. We've said our vets are too expensive for us to take care of. We've said that protecting the elderly are too expensive and economic development for some of our communities is too expensive. And shockingly, I have a feeling we're about to say that the life of our Montana citizens is too expensive. I can't wait for the headlines and papers around the state if we can't even get this to the floor to discuss. Again, when we're voting on this, folks, you don't have to vote for the bill, but this is about just getting it to the floor for a conversation to help our communities and make sure people aren't killing themselves. Please vote green.
The question now arises on the motion of Representative Schreiner to withdraw House Bill 509 from the House Human Services Committee and placed on second reading on Monday. Those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? If not, the clerk will record the vote.
Mr. Speaker, 49 representatives voted aye, 49 have voted no.
Motion has failed.